Welcome again for those that are watching elsewhere, and all you lovely people that have been with us for the last 5 days. Welcome to our 8-day mini writing course, How to Find and Write the Story Your Heart's Most Hungry For, where, as you know, our aim is to help you get ready to be ready to write those stories that are most important to you. And last week, all our conversations were around quite literally how to find the stories that you have to write and all the beautiful, formats and genres and ways that those stories could then live out in the world. And this week is going to be a shift more to the nuts and bolts process of how to make sure you get that story out. The process, a lot of the old do the battle with one's writer self. To get it out into the world in its deepest and most layered and lovely form. But before we jump into all that, again, for those that don't know us, I am Holly Payberg-Torroija. I am a writer, producer, and former development exec turned writing coach. And I always say when I say writing coach, I mean a coach for writers as opposed to teaching you how to write, because I think the hardest part of writing is being a writer, doing the day-to-day, get your butts in the seats, dealing with yourself, being willing to go deep, doing all the work you need to do in order to allow and free those stories that are within you. That's the hardest part. So that is what my specialty is, and I've teamed up with this lovely human who will introduce herself.
And if you don't know who I am Kelly Carlin-McCall. I am an author, a depth psychologist, podcaster, Emmy award-winning TV producer, and founders of Human on the Verge, which is an online community that supports both creatives in their writing projects, but other people also who are seeking deep and long-lasting personal transformation and finding their voice and place in the world. And my writing accomplishment and relationship with it happened 10 years ago when my memoir, A Carlin Home Companion, was published by St. Martin's Press. And that's me right now today. I'm sure there's 10,000 other things I could say, but I'm also the mom of Stella, a Jack Russell
The
Terrier who's 17
cutest,
years old.
the cutest little doggy that ever did live. Yes. All right. So back to it. I will just give, for those of you that weren't with us last week, just a tiny little recap of the fact that we were saying that the story that you have to write, that's the one, is because it's the one that doesn't leave you alone. It's the one that's been poking at you for ages in whatever form. It's the thing better than anybody else because that's what life showed you. It's the stuff that really pisses you off, or the stuff that makes, you find so beautiful it makes you cry, or the stuff that makes you laugh so hard you pee. It's all those that, and story is then your chance to take that nugget of passion in whichever direction and turn it into something that is either just pure old entertainment, or it lifts people up, it makes them think, or it becomes a way shower, all that kind of great stuff. And the reason that we really drill home to find that story that you have to write is because, you know, it's a slog. Writing is a marathon. Writing is, whether it's a feature film or a novel or a solo show, or I mean, there's a long journey to get to the other side of it. And if it's not something you're deeply passionate, if it's not something that you have to write, then it's kind of a matter of when you will end up giving up on it or putting it off to the side, because life will start lifing and there'll be every excuse as to why, or you fall out of love with it. And especially in these times, like Kelly was saying, there's a lot going on. And so even further, you'll give up on it. So find that story that you have to write, the one that makes you go, no, you need to do right by yourself. So you keep showing up, you keep going la 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 and diving in there. You want to add
I
to that a
picture
little?
it on the other side of like a window, like going beep, 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 beep. I mean, it just, and you can like distract yourself for a while. Oh, I'm
Yep.
going to go off and I'm going to da, 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 da. And then 6 months later, it's like, beep, 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 beep,
Right?
beep. Yeah, it just will not leave you alone. And that's the I think that's a great moment because it's like, oh, it really does need to be expressed. Like
Mhm.
it's choosing for me,
Yeah,
which I think is choosing can be a scary thing. What do I
yeah,
write? And there's so much Instagrammy ads, about, people building their brand through story or
yeah.
whatever it is, or becoming an influencer or whatever. And it's like, sure, okay, yeah, that will happen because your story is your brand, because it is
Mhm.
your story. But it's not about that. It's about honoring that invisible aspect, whatever it is, genius, daemon, muse, part of us, soul,
Yeah,
whatever word you want to call it, that will not fucking leave us alone.
yeah,
And I love that because it puts our ego in perspective. Our ego wants to think it's in charge of the universe, but with this thing that keeps going ding, 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 it's like, oh, damn it, I gotta figure out how to do that thing.
I
So,
know. And this voice in my head came up and goes, and you don't have to know why.
yeah. Oh, totally.
That's part
No.
of the journey. You don't have to know
Yeah.
why you feel compelled to tell that story. That'll be,
It'll be revealed. Trust
it
me. It'll
will
be
be
revealed in the
revealed.
writing and or 5 years later after you've written it and going, oh,
Oh, I
now I
see.
see.
Uh-huh. Exactly. So now that, and again, if you're like, I still don't know, it doesn't, it's again, this is part of the part of the process of figuring it out. And like we mentioned last week too, because we started toying with, well, what, and is it this? Is it this? Are you going to perform it? Are you going to film it? Are you going to, is it a novel? Is it, you don't have to know that either. It's just we want to stretch your psyche, so to speak, into, oh, there's many cubbies this can fit in. There's many forms it can take, and you just want to know that as you're heading on the journey. So you stay wide open. I think this world sometimes doesn't let you play in the sand like that in the old sandbox
Mhm.
nearly long enough where everything's possible. And so we keep trying to show you, oh, there's so many things that are, don't limit your imagination at these early stages. Just find the thing you're passionate about. That's the most important thing. And then this week, we are going to start diving into process. How do we, a little more the nuts and bolts of it, but still, our process that we advocate for is very, very macro at the beginning, because the philosophy is you can't write the story till you actually know the story. And you need to give yourself the blessing of actually knowing the story first. Like, give yourself the time it takes to actually know the story. And I always say there's definitely a difference. One of the examples I give is that, you know, in your family, everybody knows a lot of the same stories, but there's always one that tells it better. And that's because that is a separate art form. The telling of it is one thing, and the knowing of it is another. And so I try to, with our process, separate those out, and we do a slow down to speed up process where there's a lot of almost spend more time getting to know the story, and then it flies out. The best pilot script I ever wrote was because I spent a full year knowing every last thing about every character's want, need, journey, blah blah blah, and then I wrote the script in 2 weeks. I mean, it just, boom, fast. It was like now I could run, but now I could focus only on style and tone and voice, and I was slowing myself down by making decisions. The decisions were done. The characters were talking at that point. They're downright bossy and arguing with each other. So then you're just like, and that is so much fun when you can do that too. So knowing all that, I say, and Kelly's going to have some wonderful thoughts about when it's memoir because it's a little bit different for fiction and memoir. And as I think we've told you guys, I'm more of the fiction side and she's the memoir side. But I always say, start with your heroine or your hero of your story, because there has to be in every story there has to be somebody that we care about that's going for something, that we know, and there has to be some stakes involved, and it takes us on a ride, and we're left with something in the end. That has to be there. The deep emotional underbelly of your story. We've all seen these cute, clever stories that are put out these days that are not well developed, and you're like, you watched it and you can't figure out what's wrong with it. It's nicely done on all levels, but it's just so surface. There's no you don't care. You want to care, everyone, but you don't care, and it's because they didn't do this work. They did, this is the really choosing your heroine or your hero, and then finding out every last thing about them and what they care about and why and how they hurt, and not protecting them, letting them get hurt in the story, letting them, go on this whole ride. That's the battle. And you got to do that right up front because it's so informative. It forms everything. It is like because the story really, especially fiction again, where you have to craft everything, you really are laying track. You're not going to know the whole story all at once. You're going to have to layer on top of layer. And there's other sub stories going on in a great story. There's all this stuff. There's world building, but you have to start somewhere. You have to layer on top. And I always say, layer on the thing that absolutely no story can live without. And that is that emotional journey of your heroine and your hero. So you start with them, you choose one. Um, and sometimes that's not always that easy either. And I'll give you a couple little examples, but my general rule is it's not always what you think. When we think heroine or hero, we're like, oh, you know, the great person or the whatever. But no, it's really mostly it's whatever character grows the most. The one that story arc is going to be like from the beginning of your story to the end of your story, they are not the same person. They something has altered them. Even if it takes place over the course of 24 hours, we've all had profound 24 hours before where everything changes, so it doesn't matter the length of your story. It just means something happens, and they got to deal with it. Otherwise, why are we watching? And so you're figuring out which of the characters, and sometimes there's an ensemble, sometimes there's two, and yeah, you got to really dig into both. Sometimes, and sometimes, again, it's not what you think. Like, I loved this example. I saw a talk one day, they were talking about the Mr. Rogers movie. Did any of you see that? Not the documentary, but the actual movie. Well, you'll understand when I explain anyway. They were like, when we first started to write this one, we didn't quite know what to do because we realized that Mr. Rogers isn't really a compelling hero. In the weirdest sense. Like he wasn't really like Mr. Rogers was Mr. Rogers in the beginning and in the middle and in the end. I mean, he was great and then he was great still and then he was also still great. And so what they did is there was a reporter who, and this is a true story, he was one of those hard-hitting reporters in hot spots and all that stuff, and he got kind of in trouble, and was sort of grounded a little bit. And then they sent him on what he thought was a fluff piece to go do a piece on Mr. Rogers. So he changed. He was one guy when he went in to write that story about Mr. Rogers, and by the end, he was somebody else entirely. Mr. Rogers was, in that sense, the antagonist, because his cynical worldview didn't stand a chance against Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I think of like also other films about justice.
Hmm.
Same thing. Character is a force against injustice,
Hmm.
and they are throughout. And what ends up changing is the system around them.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think of Norma Ray and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
similar type of thing that that their antagonism is the heroic thing
Yeah, Ted
because
Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
He's a total antagonist, and he's a protagonist. Like
And he
he's on a
changes a little bit
journey,
too. He does, but yeah.
but
Yeah,
largely he makes everybody else change.
exactly.
Um, but yeah, and so you're gonna have to know both, really, I guess I should say. You're gonna have to know who you're compelling of those. And yeah, sometimes, especially in a heroine story, sometimes it's true. The heroine is both the protagonist and the antagonist all in one, because a lot of times it's their own selves they're fighting. Um, but either way, it's whoever the characters are, I guess I'm trying to say, in your story that have big arcs and draw the thing, getting to know them, starting there, getting to know them and all their ups and downs and needs and all that stuff is going to inform so much of the rest of your story that it helps. And it also helps start to weed out what does need to be there and what doesn't need to be there, because you're going to start to know what absolutely must, and then it starts getting large. And then you're like, okay, maybe I don't need all those other things. So to me, that's the best place to start, is with your main hero or heroine. And we can talk, you guys can ask questions about all that, but a little bit different for memoir. So Kelly, let you dive in there.
Yeah, and the difference I think is not as big as we think it is
Mhm.
because you are most likely the protagonist of your memoir because you are telling some story about your journey and or your family's journey. That was kind of mine. Mine was my journey within my family and how my family evolved. Also, that was my first memoir. Um, and getting to start can be as simple as, if creating a little bit of the parentheses around what is that beginning start, and we talked about this last week. Is it birth? For me, it
Mhm.
was my parents meeting in 1960, and then it ended at my dad's death with a little bit of an epilogue, just post-death of some things that I did that reflected back well on the whole journey and my relationship with him. Um, so I knew that. So therefore, then all of that material was going to be the material that I was going to write about. And so, but but really for me, the starting was more about not overwhelming myself with my whole life,
Mhm.
but chunking it down. And so partly what we do over the weekend, which we're going to do, which is breaking the story, which is this beat thing. There's a way to do the beats for fiction that are helpful and parallel to what we're doing for memoir. But I like to think about the memoir part is like if you only had 100 words to tell your life story,
Mhm.
what moments have to fucking be there? Because if they're not, people aren't going to get the point of your story. And this is how you start to
Right. It
reveal.
all falls apart if you don't know
Right,
those pieces of
right. So
information.
whatever urge you have to put in that 100 word, like, oh shit, I only have 100 fucking words. I need to, and you can, I mean, like, I use like one word to like represent maybe a whole section of my life, but still that word has to be in there because that section has to be in there. Um, and that then what you end up choosing in that exercise reveals a lot about what Holly's talking about, which is what is the territory?
Yeah.
What is this about?
Yeah.
And then it also gives you a nice kind of, and I'm not saying outline, but it gives you a nice smaller bites to take of this thing called my life, right? And then
Yeah.
you start to see in what you chose, oh, this is about my relationship with my mother, or this is about my needing to heal my relationship with my mother so that I could heal from cancer. Like whatever it is, you're going to see. And let's say it is, you're writing from age 25 to 50 about something in your life, but there are going to be moments in childhood and adolescence and stuff that will need to be spoken of or made clear to the reader so that they get what's at stake,
Hmm.
in the change. Because for memoir, it is basically you are the protagonist and there are antagonists
Hmm.
Antagonists are usually more interior stuff, but there are absolutely, for me, it was a lot of interior stuff and my relationship with that events, right? Things like that. So there are going to be events and people that are going to be that. So, but it is that, that thing where you're not going to know exactly what it wants to be because I mean, I've been working on my second memoir now for 7 years and I didn't know what it wanted to be. I tried to get a second book deal with it. I had the of it. I knew the time period of it. I kind of knew what I knew some of the stories I had to tell. Uh, but it wasn't coalescing and it wasn't feeling like a big yes for me. And therefore, then my agent and my publisher were like, if it's not a big yes for you, it's not going to be a big yes for us.
Exactly, exactly.
But here I am now, 7, 8 years later, having spent the last 2 years just starting. I just started writing. And so much more has happened the last 2 years that has actually presented to me what this book is actually about now.
Yeah, you
So
drilled down and drilled down till you got to the point. And then
exactly.
the second you know the point, which then it's
Yeah. Yeah, then you can find the string that kind of holds the point together and all the pieces that, but you do have to figure out the point
Mhm.
at the beginning because then you know why you're including certain anecdotes, certain moments, certain emotion, certain inner life, and things like that. And like Holly says, then it is then a matter of just like, oh, I have 15 chapters to write about this, and I know now what each one of these are and why it has to be in my story. I know the point
Yeah.
of the chapter
Hmm.
and how it fits the point of the arc of my journey.
Exactly. And the point is so closely aligned with the heroine or hero's journey that that's again one of the reasons I say dive into that one. That's where you're going to find the clues of the point. What is the point of this story? And you
Yeah.
won't know right away. Like the book I mentioned last week that I'm working on, um, initially I thought it was about a girl who's stuck in the middle of two conflicting, factions in her small town there, and that she was going to have to ultimately, pick a side and stand up for herself. And that's what I thought it was. And and it still is. That is part of the point. But then as I dug in deeper, as I kept going, I realized, oh, this is actually about a girl who's coming out of the closet spiritually. Like there's things that happen inside, like she helps her friends save their theater by they're being oppressed, because they're gay and they're going to lose their theater because they want to get married. And she ends up using the laws of religion. She's like, oh, why don't I? Why don't we just turn the theater into a church and then we'll be protected? Um, but what happens out of all of that, and it goes down a thing, is that that idea for her didn't come from nowhere to create a church. And she starts liking her own idea, but she can't be the head of it because she
Too
is,
dangerous. Yep.
yes.
Internally too dangerous for her.
Yes, and so it turns it just, I pulled that thread. It's funny, your own psyche tells a story and then you pull that thread and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So you just make stabs at first, but like Kelly with her memoir, continuing to look at like her history like that of the protagonist that is her, it's like sooner or later you find that thread and you hit the point and then it's like, oh, and then the whole story makes sense and then
Yeah, and usually something is not working because you do have a blind spot within yourself.
Mhm.
It's just like the protagonist in a story has a blind spot and things aren't working because they're not admitting what they really, really want.
Mhm.
And as a memoir writer, you the writing of your memoir is a protagonist moment in your life because you are claiming a story that is most likely has felt a little dangerous as you lived your life, that
Mhm.
there's something you are revealing about yourself and the way you see the world that has been a revelation for you
Hmm.
and may still be a revelation for you. And the very act of it is that. I mean, the very act of writing my first memoir, I was taking a stand for being able to tell my own story in a world that generally looks down upon celebrities' children telling their own story because they have a judgment about what that's going to be and how frivolous or self-serving that will be. And there was some part of me that was determined to show that by telling my story, I'm giving every soul on the planet permission to tell their story.
Hmm.
And so that was a rebellious act for me. It wasn't the only motivation, but it did show me that the very act of being seen and heard in our lives is is a heroic moment for
Hmm.
all of us. And writing fiction too, because the act of telling your protagonist's story is a heroic moment for you as a creative. It
Yeah.
really is. And so we're living these things as we are also writing about these things.
Exactly. And I will add something too that it sounds like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, but welcome to the world of writing. We come at helping you figure that out from multiple angles. So on one side, Kelly and I both are saying, yes, you want to think about those parentheses, like where are you going to box this story into? Where's it going to start? Is it a moment in time or is it so you're looking at it that way? But then you also, especially with your protagonist, you're also looking at their entire life,
Yep.
cradle to grave for development, not because it's going to end up necessarily literally written or as flashbacks or whatever in your story. It's because the knowing of which will show up. No character shows up fresh on day one of whatever moment of your story on the first page. They show up with all their baggage and all their shit from all the whatever, and it just shows up in all these beautiful, lovely ways. Like suddenly they just no white. I can't have white things in my house. You don't know why. It's just all their various quirks. You better know what they are and like genuinely, not because you're just making shit up. You can tell when a writer knows their character because you feel like I don't know, it's crazy. When it's a really well-written characters, it's like you feel like they're your friends, you feel like they exist in the world
Yes.
like you know them. And it's because the writer did all that work. They didn't get credit for it necessarily directly, but it comes through because it's just really well done. But it's because they actually spent all that time really understanding, and that's what Kelly and I were saying. The childhood of the character or the real self, if it's a memoir, is the treasure trove of all treasure troves for that, and you must dig into it.
Yeah. Yeah, you must know what's shaped. And the audience, like you said, it might not be a direct knowing, but the audience will know that this person has been shaped by life
100%.
for sure.
Like I remember even because we do another because again the way we help you come at this because we think this is the most important thing to know all this stuff before you start writing is so important. So we do the upcoming retreat is really seeing the what happened. That's the parentheses. It's like the this, the this, the this, and in the early stages, it's just a guess. You don't have to know, but it helps it helps stretch your thinking along to sort of start guessing what happened sort of externally. Then we do another retreat in February where it's like you sink down like an actor would inside of your protagonist and have like I call it like the Google Street view. You're taking a nice walk through the story via only their point of view. Like they got the blinders, a lot of us
They're
humans,
just living their little limits and their
they're not
biases
worried
and their
about,
way of
yeah.
seeing and doing and their brokenness and their glory, and they're just in it.
Yes, because that's the other thing. Writers know too much, but the truth is your character doesn't know shit at the beginning of the story. They make all the mistakes and trip over all the things, and then they're smarter at the end. They can't start that way, which is hard for writers sometimes. So we pull them in and like sink into only that point of view. And then eventually we do. And this is a real fun one. We make people sink into the point of view of whatever their strongest villain of the story is or their antagonist. Um, and that is hilarious because some of my writers have been like, they don't want to think about the antagonist in that way. I'm like, even the little evil one, was 3 years old in his Spider-Man jammies running around at one point.
But, and I have to say, when I did that week, it's called the Villains Weekend. When I did the Villains Weekend, when did we do that? Is that April?
Mhm.
We did that in April
April or May, I can't remember now.
because I'm working on my life story and I'm working on like the last 17 years of my life. Uh, the person who came up in my villains work not only made me understand what my memoir is actually about, but it fucking changed my life. Like it was the deepest therapy I'd had in a long time. And because I work already imaginally with inner figures, because I'm a Jungian, post-Jungian trained therapist, I was able to see this figure, this antagonist, as this aspect of my personality and an aspect within me that has been running the show forever and I just want to say personally, I coached Holly for 6 years, but just her one that one fucking weekend, she like did some kind of work on my inner life that therapy has not been able to get to for a long time. So I just want to say that I mean that's part of the reason too that last year I looked at Holly and I'm like, I mean, because all the work that I helped her do and the structure that I create to help people do personal development, she really took the heart and really saw how it applies to what she does. I mean, it's incredible. And that was the moment when I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I think we need to figure out how to do more of this together because
Mhm.
it was so revelatory." So those 3 weekends are these great kind of um moments when we do a lot of the work and we're still writing every day and we're doing all of that, but then we come and we kind of do this deep
And yeah.
churning thing. And there are also the all of that curriculum is inside our world. So just because if you don't come to the weekend to do it with us, you're still getting a chance to do the work. I mean, there is a way to,
Oh
to get
yeah.
the work
No,
done.
yeah.
And you will go back to it and you know, hear it all again and do it all again to keep, bringing the layers forward. But I just wanted to say that about this such an interesting approach because, I've read all the books on writing and I've gone alone, gone it alone a lot, and I've never encountered anything like what you do, Holly. I
You
just,
did it to me. It's like I say, we're walking each other home. All of us.
truly,
All of us.
truly.
All of you here too. It's
I'm
like
still in awe of it. I'm still in awe of where you take our minds so that we get the fuck out of our own way. I still feel like there's a wand in your back
I
pocket
don't
or
have any
something
idea
like
what you're
that.
doing. I just
Anyway,
know.
I'm not blown. I just wanted to say all that because it really is this this process is so fucking interesting and as a writer, it's amazing because it's helping me with that stuff, but really also just as a human being on the journey, it really is the heroine's journey in the end.
Well, and I mean, it was created because, and the advice that we're sharing today about how to start is also because, like, I know what it feels like to be someone with a lot of depth and have a lot of vision and have a lot of, and not be able to get it out.
Yeah.
It's really painful. I used to describe it like it feels like you're one of those 2 liter Coke bottles with the top on and somebody shook it. That's what it feels like to me. Like, that was
Yeah.
my 20s.
And it's a pressure, like for me, it was a pressure in my chest when I was living, not telling my
Yeah.
stories, pressure in my chest all day.
And
Yeah.
then I realized most of us deal with that have big stories in our heart. So it was really more of, and it wasn't natural for me. I don't know. Like, I'm not Stephen King who seems to just, just poop them out. It's just like, oops, I wrote another novel. I don't, that was
Where'd
never,
that come from?
so I had to learn,
I think that's cocaine, Holly. I think you'll find that was cocaine.
But he doesn't write like a cocaine, like cocaine is a very flat writing, but yes, maybe the energy to sit down, I don't know.
Think, some people can allow better, and that's what
Yeah.
I think. I had an acting teacher that taught years ago that she's like, there's no bad acting, there's just more free or less free. And so she would
Hmm.
focus on, she was my inspiration for my
Really.
program, even. So her whole focus was, how can I get you more free? What's in the way? Why aren't you letting, and that's when I started to realize, oh, because it takes a lot of fucking courage to be a writer, and to express the things that other people don't, and to understand the things. Frankly, writers do understand things about humanity that maybe other people aren't spending as much time
Oh
trying
yeah, we're sensitive
to
souls.
define, and
Yeah.
so this is, to get back to topic, and then let you guys
Yes,
ask
we
questions.
will.
It's really starting with those, I said with the heroine, but really you do need to know who your heroine is. You need to know what that major thing in the way is, the antagonist or whatever, and the point. And those three things can take you a long damn time to really have and that you're not doing it wrong if that's taking you a long time. That's
Yeah.
what, like, if I could input, like, that's the slow down to speed up. That's the richer you go in the answering of all three of those things, and understanding the container of it all. Then when you actually write the pages, they are going to matter. They're going to be rich. They're going to be delicious.
Well, and I just want to say that, like I said earlier about this writing being kind of an act of rebellion, because our culture wants to push into your brain that everything needs to be done quickly. Um, now
It
people
needs to
are
be
like, oh, I'll
commercial.
use AI to write my book. That'll help me. Because that's the new quick. The new
Yeah.
quick is AI. I'm just going to have a machine do it for me. And it's a fantasy, you guys. It's a fantasy. Nothing gets done quickly. Nothing of significance or that of meaning gets done quickly in our culture. But we are from day fucking one as a human being. We are sold, microwaves and instant this and instant that. And and as we know, we're all humans of a certain age here. We know how long it takes to do something of purpose and meaning. So, um, and Holly is right about this, that if you take the time, which could be a year,
Hmm.
for me, it's been 3 years or almost 7 years to figure out to know the story. And I am, like I said, I am walking, both Holly and I are walking with you, in this process right now. We know what our stories are, what we want to work on. That part we know in our heart.
Hmm.
But but we are walking this year through our own process, and we are both knowing the story. We're getting to know the story, and we're gonna, the weekend we do in a couple of weeks, we're going to just be like a day ahead of everybody, basically. But we are in pretty real time doing the prompts with you guys. So, but I just want to take a pause and just for holding space to let psyche and imagination and the soul and your genius and this story that wants to be told, to give it space to be known and seen and heard before we get into the actual sitting down and telling of it. And the telling might happen in chunks too while we're getting to know it. That's going to happen.
Hmm.
You're going to write stuff that's going to end up in it.
Hmm.
But to let yourself be relaxed enough to be open around the edges, to be permeable
To be
so
like
that
a
you can keep,
scientist with the experimenting, and when new
yeah,
information
exactly.
comes in, you go, okay, well, now we're
Well,
here.
now I need to, right now that's important to know.
Hmm.
So, but if we can, because most people want to go right to the publishing. Like, I want to share the story.
Hmm.
But the sharing the story comes after telling the story, and telling the story really only comes after knowing the story.
Absolutely. And the
So,
joy of sharing the story really only comes because you actually did go
yes.
through something. Like, what it took.
And if you really do the knowing the story, if you give it the right amount of time and love, that when it comes to sharing the story, whether it's to an agent or a publisher or an audience that you share it to directly on your own, it's going to have so much more chance
Hmm.
of being uh lifted up and shared more into the world
Hmm.
because you took that time. You know, writing an AI novel or an AI memoir, unless you're just going to give it to your kid or your family or something, it's not going to be shared into the world. I can guarantee you that right
Yeah,
now.
what you going to talk about on the podcast or the,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
or the whatever, or however you'll be
And
promoting.
that thing that got
Yeah.
you tapping on the window to begin with did not get seen and heard actually, because it's in the languaging of it yourself and the wrestling with it
Mhm.
where it actually gets seen and heard.
Exactly.
All right, you guys. See you guys tomorrow.
Yeah,
Lovely to see your
thank you.
faces.
And
Have a good day and be well.
yes, bye.